Hello and welcome to watch this video about JavaScript Node.js programming. In this video we are going to study a very simple class, and we are going to study how we can create objects of this class. And we will learn what is a constructor and what is a method of a class. And you will also learn what are instance variables, which can be also called data members, or they can be called data fields. And these objects, they can also be called instances of a class. Okay, my name is Kari Laitinen and let's start. So I have here a very simple program that can print rectangles, like I can show it. So I run the program and it prints rectangles like this, so that there's one rectangle that contains letters Z and the other rectangle contains letters X. And well, these rectangles, they have a certain width and they have a certain height. And well, we can take a look at this function here. So there is a function here named print rectangle, and for this function you can give these three parameters: given rectangle width, given rectangle height, and given filling character. And then it's called here in the main program. It's called, and so when we say that 7 and 4 and Z, we get this rectangle here. And when we give the parameters like 12 and 3 and X, we get the other rectangle. And if you count the characters, you can see that there are 12 X's in a row on each row, and then there are 3 rows of these strings containing the X's. Well, this is not a very clever program. It's again a textbook example of a simple program, and well, we can take a quick look at how this function works. So it is there is a for loop, and inside the for loop there is another for loop, and the outer for loop, it counts the rows. It starts from the 0, and this value specifies that how many rows will be printed. And then there is this other for loop, and there is the character counter, and it controls that how many characters are printed on each row. And then this parameter specifies that how many characters are printed on each row. And then this statement here inside the inner for loop then specifies that, or actually writes the character or the single character string to the screen. And of course, before each row we have to write the new, or we must start a new line, and for each new line we print a few spaces. So this is how this function works. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm supposing here that you are familiar with the functions, and now I'm going to modify this program so that we get a class with which we can specify objects, or we can specify these rectangles as objects. And each rectangle is then specified with these three values: rectangle width, rectangle height, and the filling character. So what I'm going to do now, I'll start it here. Let's do it like this. So when I want to write a class in JavaScript, I use the keyword class, and then I give the class name, and in this case the name of the class will be rectangle, like this, and then I write a couple of braces like this, and inside these braces I then specify what is this class like. And so what we need inside classes, usually it is a thing called constructor, and this constructor is like a function, and with this function we can then specify the instance variables, or which we can also call data members of the class. So the constructor is written like this, or the constructor is written with the word constructor, and then you put a pair of braces like into a function, and for this constructor you can specify parameters like for functions, and you put the parameters inside a pair of parentheses like this. And well, actually now when we are going to specify a constructor for a rectangle, we will use these same parameters that are used for this function. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut these from here, and I will put them inside these parentheses like this. So this constructor now receives these parameters like this, and then we have to do something with these parameters. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create the instance variables for this, for rectangle objects. And when I want to create instance variables, I will do it so that I will use the word this, and then I put the dot here, and then I have to give a name for the instance variable, and I now give the name rectangle width, and give one of the first parameter as a value for this instance variable. So with this keyword, this, we can specify variables or data items or data fields or data members that are inside each rectangle object. So I just copy all these three values. Like this. So now I have three data fields inside a rectangle object. And now then I can, if I want to have the same functionality for this these rectangle objects, that I can create them and I can print them, I should then have a method to print the rectangle. So I can copy this function that we had here. So I will copy it or cut it, and I will then put it inside these braces. And I will indent it a little bit. And I will rename this function. I will call it just print. And it doesn't take any parameters. And I also remove this keyword function from here. So now it is correctly written method for inside this rectangle class. So this can be now called so it is a method inside this class, and now I have to modify it a little bit so that, because now these were the original parameters that were given to this earlier function, but now I have to refer to these data members. So I just refer to them by writing this and dot and this and dot and this and dot. So now this method prints the rectangle with those values that are stored inside the rectangle object. So this is now complete, I think, or I hope. And so now we need to still modify the main program so that we actually create the objects. So I can, if I want to create the rectangle object, I will do it like this. Well, I will call it first rectangle, and I have a variable here, and I assign it an object, and then I use the operator called new, and then I say rectangle, so the name of the class, and then I can give the parameters, and actually I give the same parameters that I gave earlier to the function, so I can just remove these values here, or that text. I took just that text away. And in the same way I can create another rectangle, and again I use the new operator and say the class name and give the parameters inside parentheses. So now these values are now go to the constructor of the rectangle class. So this value is received goes here, and this value goes there, and this value goes there, and then these three values, they are stored into these three data members or instance variables inside the object. And now, well, I have just the objects created, and if I want to print them, I can do it like this. I write first rectangle, and print, and second dot print. So with the dot operator I can access the methods of a class. And now this program should behave like the original program, but let's try it. It is of course possible that I made some mistake somewhere, but the only way to find out is that I run the program. So I save it, I rerun it, and it works as before. Of course, you might ask at what sense does this make? Because now the program is longer than the original program, but sometimes it is difficult to explain the benefits of object-oriented programming, but it is in the long run, and especially if you make larger programs, it is good to define classes and use objects instead of the traditional functions. But let's take a look at this how these objects are located in memory. I made this drawing here. So I have this drawing here, and you might think that this is how these objects are located in memory, in the memory of your computer, and so each rectangle object contains now 3 data items, or data fields, or data members, or instance variables. So for instance, this object that we created first, it has the value 7, the number of characters on each row, and number 4, number of rows, and then the filling character. And the other object has then these 3 values, and you can think that they are stored into memory like this in one single place there. And then when we have these variables like this, so because now it is so that this is just a normal variable here, and we make this variable refer to an object. So you can think that each variable, when it refers to an object, it can contain, because each object has a memory address somewhere. You can think that the memory address of the variable is stored, or memory address of the object is stored into the variable, like this. Because, for instance, I could write like this. I could write like this here first. If I would write like this, and if I rerun the program, you will see that now it prints this rectangle that was specified here. So it prints this rectangle, and it never prints this rectangle. So you can think that now in this kind of situation, a new rectangle object was created with these new values, so that there would be these values 3, 3, and A there, and then this first rectangle would refer to this. It would stop referring to this variable or this object, and it would start referring to this new object. So this object would be then unreachable in the memory. Actually, I must admit that I don't know exactly how JavaScript is using computer memory, but it is no big mistake to think that the memory is used like this, and this is how object-oriented systems usually use memory. So there is some variable that can refer to an object, and then if we make a variable to refer to some other object, the reference to the old object is lost, and the old object becomes unreachable. Well, that about the memory use. Let's still make some programming. So this should clarify the use of objects, and I remove this statement, and I save this program. So now it is as before. So that well, usually classes, they have many methods, and we could write a new method for this class. For instance, I could write a method like if I would like to change the filling character, so I could write the method like this, and if I would call this new method, I could call it here like this. And I would put a new filling character there, and let's try then well, the W. And if I print it again, let's see what happens. Now you can see that the second rectangle, it was printed twice here. Here's the first printing, and here's the second printing, and between the printings I changed the filling character, so that we usually in object-oriented programming we can use methods to modify the objects. So that's the common way to make programs in object-oriented way. And so here all the other characteristics of this rectangle, they remained the same. So the width is the same, the height is the same, but only the filling character was modified. Let's try another method. I invented this method, or the idea of this method I got just before I started to make this video, so I don't know how well it works, but let's try it. Because there could be one way if we would think of rotating a rectangle. So that would mean that we would then then if you would rotate a rectangle, it would mean that it should turn and the width of the rectangle would become the height, and the height would become the width. So let's try this. Rotate is a good name, and it doesn't take any parameters. And well, I have to do it like this, or I can use var here. And then I have set the width of the rectangle, and then I say now I set the height. So I say that the rectangle width or the rectangle height becomes the rectangle width, and the rectangle height becomes the width that was saved earlier. So let's try it. So I will just modify. Let's modify this so that I rotate. I take out this set filling call and I rotate the rectangle. Let's see what happens. So the rotated rectangle now looks like this. Well, because we are now using the terminal window here, this rotation is not so beautiful, but you can, if you have a little bit of imagination, you can think that it is now rotated well. So this was a short introduction to object-oriented programming. So we define classes with the keyword class and b keyword class name, and then we use a constructor, and we can give parameters to constructors like functions or methods, and then we can specify instance variables or data fields or data members with this word like this. So these values then become values inside each rectangle object, and then we can write methods like rotate, set filling, and print. And we don't need the keyword function here, but these methods, they are like functions. But if we want to refer to these data fields, then we have to use this word again here. And when we create objects, we use the name of the class, and then we use the new operator like this. And if we want to call a method, then we use first the name of the variable that is referring to an object, and then we use the dot operator, and then we use the method name. So thank you for your interest, and goodbye.